to 2-year prison for social media post. United Nations urges safe passage for civilians in war-torn Sudan city of El Fasher. We'll bring you these stories just in a moment. Stay with us. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. We head to Cameroon first today as Paul Biya, aged 92, has been re-elected for an eighth term with 53.7% of the votes. This is according to official results announced by the Constitutional Council on Monday. Rival candidate and former government minister Issa Chiroma Bakari came second with 35.2%. Chiroma had claimed victory against the incumbent 2 days after the October 12 election. Earlier, 4 people were killed in clashes between security forces and supporters of a Cameroon opposition leader who claims to have won the recent presidential elections. Authorities said ahead of the announcement of official results yesterday being Monday. Chiroma, who challenged President Paul Biya's 43-year grip on power in the October 12 ballot, had called on his supporters to march peacefully on the eve of the announcement, despite a ban on public gatherings. In a related development, inhabitants of Douala have been protesting for a second day following the announcement that President Paul Biya was re-elected for an eighth term. Armed forces have been deployed to several districts of the city. Barricades, fires, live bullets in Douala as in many other cities of Cameroon. The aftermath of the announcement of results for the presidential election was violent. Recall that current President Paul Biya was declared the winner of the elections by the Constitutional Council on Monday, opening the way to his eighth term as president at 92 years old. Biya has ruled the country without interruption since 1982. The announcement, already contested by opposition candidate Issa Chiroma Bakari, triggered widespread anger in the population. Meanwhile, Ivory Coast President Al-Hassan Ouattara has won a fourth term, securing a crushing 89.77% in a vote which his 2 greatest rivals were barred from. Reports say nearly 9 million voters were eligible to cast their ballot on Saturday in the world's top cocoa producer, which has resisted coups and jihadist attacks plaguing much of West Africa, but which saw tensions soar and deadly violence in the run-up to the election. Even before the provisional results announcement, Ouattara was already anticipated to have swept the polls after early tallies on Sunday showed him winning upwards of 90% of the vote. Turnout was close to 100% in his northern strongholds. Still looking at politics on the continent, with no heavyweight opposition candidates cleared to compete in Wednesday's election, many Tanzanians feel the vote is less like a contest and more like a coronation for President Samia Suluhu Hassan as she faces her first presidential election. The 65-year-old became the East African nation's first female head of state after the death in 2021 of sitting President John Magufuli. He was admired on the one hand for his no-nonsense drive to stamp out corruption, but criticized on the other for his authoritarian clampdown on dissent and controversial attitude towards the COVID pandemic. President Samia, who had been vice president, seemed like a breath of fresh air, and with her warmer and friendlier style, she initiated reforms that seemed to represent a radical departure from her predecessor's policies. Her 4R policy, reconciliation, resilience, reform and rebuilding, reopened Tanzania to foreign investors, restored donor relations and mollified the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. Away from that, a court in Mali's capital sentenced former Prime Minister Moussa Mara to 1 year in prison on Monday, convicting the prominent politician over a social media post expressing solidarity with political prisoners in a case critics see as a crackdown on dissent under the ruling military leader Colonel Assimi Goïta. The Bamako court found Mara guilty of undermining the credibility of the state and opposing legitimate authority. He was handed a 1-year prison term, an additional 1-year suspended sentence, and a fine of 500,000 CFA francs, about $887. The charges stemmed from a July post in which Mara mentioned meeting with political prisoners and vowed to seek justice for them. Mara, who served as Prime Minister from 2014 to 2015, has been incarcerated since August 1st. Over now to Mali, where we see schools being closed and universities nationwide due to a fuel scarcity caused by a blockade on fuel imports jihadi militants imposed on the capital. Education Minister Amadou Siveni announced on state television that classes would be suspended for 2 weeks due to disruption in fuel supplies that are affecting the movement of school staff. Militants from the Al-Qaeda-backed Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam, while Muslim League group announced a ban on fuel imports from neighboring countries into Mali in early September, squeezing the landlocked country's fragile economy and leaving hundreds of fuel trucks stranded at the border. Mali, along with neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, have battled an insurgency by armed groups, including some allied with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group, as well as local rebels. Following military coups in all three nations in recent years, they have expelled French forces and turned to Russia's mercenary units for security assistance, which analysts say has made little difference. In Mali's capital, Bamako, endless queues have stretched in front of gas stations, and the fuel scarcity has affected the price of commodities and transportation for a country that relies on fuel imports for domestic needs. The blockade is seen as a significant setback for Mali's military junta. The junta defended its forceful takeover of power in 2020 as a necessary step to end decades of security crisis. Now, according to reports, the Malian military attempted to escort some fuel trucks from border areas to Bamako. Some trucks arrived, but others were attacked by militants. In a separate development, Sudanese paramilitary forces have captured a crucial military base in El Fasher, the army's last stronghold in Darfur, dealing a significant blow to the military and escalating the humanitarian crisis in a city where hundreds of thousands of civilians remain trapped under siege. The Rapid Support Forces RSF on Monday took control of a strategic military base in North Darfur's capital, marking a pivotal moment in the more than a year-long conflict. El Fasher represented the final major bastion of the Sudanese military in the western region, and its potential fall could redraw the nation's territorial control and risk further fragmentation. The United Nations has reported over 26,000 people newly displaced from the city, which has been at the heart of the conflict for over a year. Ghana makes local languages compulsory in schools. Stay tuned for details of this and more after this time out. Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned. It's still Spotlight Africa. We're telling you stories all around the continent. We head now to Kenya, where, on a really sad note, a small plane has crashed in the coastal region of Kwale early today while en route to Masai Mara National Reserve, with 12 people feared dead. According to authorities, the crash happened in a hilly and forested area about 40 kilometers, about 25 miles from the Diani airstrip, Kwale County. Commissioner Stephen Orinde told the Associated Press that the passengers were all foreign tourists and their nationalities would be confirmed later. The Kenya Civil Aviation Authority said that 12 people were on board the Cessna Caravan type aircraft, and authorities were investigating the cause of the crash. The breakdown of how many were passengers and crew was not immediately clear. Officials said the aircraft crashed minutes after takeoff and burst into flames, leaving a charred wreckage at the scene. We head to West Africa, where Ghana and its government has announced that all teachers must now use local languages as the main medium of instruction at the basic school level. Education Minister Haruna Idrisu revealed the new policy on Friday, October 24, calling it a decisive step toward improving learning outcomes and protecting Ghana's cultural identity. This shift challenges decades of English dominance in Ghana's education system. The idea behind the policy is not new and already has strong global backing. Research by UNESCO and the World Bank has long shown that children learn faster and more confidently when taught in their mother tongue, especially during their early years of schooling. For Ghana's government, the policy is also about cultural empowerment. After generations of using English, a colonial inheritance, as the language of instruction, officials say it is time to reconnect education with identity. This idea is also gaining momentum in countries like South Africa, Kenya, and Tanzania. A devastating nighttime fire swept through the working-class Funu neighborhood of Bukavu, killing 14 members of two families mourning amid the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the rebel-controlled city. In the smoldering aftermath, Monday morning, Red Cross volunteers and local youth worked solemnly through the charred debris of collapsed homes, recovering victims' remains. The fire, which erupted around midnight, rapidly consumed multiple dwellings in an area known for unregulated construction and frequent electrical hazards. This is all we're able to bring to you at this time on Spotlight Africa, bringing you stories all around the continent. This has been put together by Spectrum Television. Do well to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. I am Uyai MM. Thanks for watching. Good afternoon.